Today on the Vegan Family Kitchen podcast, I meet with Crystal Bonnet, a raw vegan chef and author of the just published beautiful cookbook, The Art of Raw Desserts. Crystal is a graduate of the Matthew Kenney Culinary Academy and of the Pure Joy Academy. She develops unique and delicious all-vegan raw recipes, and she now teaches everything she knows to home cooks and professional chefs alike. You can find her courses on her website, crystaldawnculinary.com. In this interview, Crystal shares what got her started on her vegan and raw journey. She describes her lifestyle today, and she shares her best tips for beginners to get started in adding a little bit more raw food into their diet. I am so excited to be talking with you, Crystal, today about raw food. Welcome to the Vegan Family Kitchen podcast. I'm glad you're here.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the invite, and I'm excited to talk to you.
Awesome. Let's start by talking about how you came to eat a lot of raw food, a lot of, vegan food for starters, but what is your journey toward this whole raw food thing?
Yeah, sure. So I will try to keep it short. My journey has been very progressive throughout my whole life. I didn't just wake up one day and become vegan overnight. I know a lot of people have done that, which is so amazing. I realized at a really young age, when I was about 5 years old, that I made that connection between meat and animals. And I didn't want to eat red meat, so I had stopped eating red meat. And then as time progressed, I just started losing the appetite for more animal-based products. So in my early 20s, I cut out all white meat because at that time I was only not eating red meat, but then I was also having skin issues. So I quit dairy. And then at the same time, I quit eating olive meat together. So I was, pescatarian because I was still eating seafood and eggs. And then as time progressed, fast forward to my I have to think about the math here. Because I've been vegan now for 10 years. Okay, yeah. So when I was 30, I was working in a huge office, about 400 people, and I was constantly getting sick. And I was living in Edmonton, Alberta, where it's really dry and cold, and so you can't get outside much in the winter. And just my immune system and my whole body was telling me something was wrong. And at that time, I was eating pescatarian, but I was never a cook or a chef, and I hated cooking. And even cutting up an apple was like the end of the world for me. So I wasn't eating a lot of fresh foods. I was eating a lot of processed food, packaged oatmeal, packaged frozen meals, a lot of eggs with gluten-free toast. Maybe sometimes with avocado. So I'm not eating the micronutrients and all the vitamins and minerals that we get from fresh living fruits and vegetables. And so how I had realized that was I was constantly getting sick. And then so I'm like, clearly I need to do some kind of detox or something. And my body hates me right now. So I was looking online and I just came across a 21-day raw food reset. And right then and there, I knew that that was exactly what I needed. And that's what I was going to do. I was so committed. And I downloaded this meal plan, a 21-day meal plan, back in, 10 years ago now. And I went out, I had nothing, right? Because like I said, I was never an avid cook. I didn't have any spices. I didn't have ingredients. I had to start from scratch. So I went and I was so committed though. I went and bought the Vitamix. I invested in all of this stuff for my health, went and bought all the spices, all the superfoods, all of these things, the food processor, and I did this 21-day raw food reset, and I couldn't believe how amazing I felt, and I just couldn't go back to eating seafood and eggs. I totally lost the palate for it after the 21 days, and that's how everything started and spiraled from there. I started eating high raw. I don't eat 100% raw. I eat about 80 to 90% depending on the season, and I found my creativity, my passion for raw foods, and that's what I do today now with my business.
That is just beautiful. I'm so glad that it's also, it's wonderful that it worked for you as well, that it took you from this place where you were pretty much down to this energized and lively place 10 years later, which is often a time of life when a lot of people kind of lose out in that period. And it sounds like you gained a lot more life from doing this. Would you agree?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, 100%. I mean, I never had any kind of hobby or a passion before that. And I just felt like I was existing and surviving. You know, I was working a 9 to 5 that obviously I didn't like, and just living that day-to-day life. And I didn't have anything in my life that really excited me or ignited a fire and passion in me. So when I had discovered raw food and the creativity of it, then, you know, I started a food blog and started doing food photography, and I found this creative side that I never knew that I had. And so, yeah, and that's how I decided I wanted to turn it into a business, because I loved it so much. And I was like, I can't see myself doing anything else.
How does, because you were not professionally involved in culinary arts previously, were you?
No, never.
So how does
my only culinary training is raw vegan food.
Right. So how does one become a raw vegan chef?
I mean, I think really it's just all about experience and knowledge. If you put in the practice and want to learn, for me, I love to learn. So I took every course under the sun that I could take. And I just wanted to keep learning and learning and learning. I traveled all over the world, took courses, all the online courses, and And so, just honestly, I think just really knowledge and experience.
That's awesome. And you're coming to the stage now where you're really sharing your knowledge with others. We'll talk about your courses in a moment, but the big event for you in your life right now, in your professional life, is that you're launching your first print book, and it is called The Art of Raw Desserts. Tell me a little bit more about what made you decide that it was the right time to do a project like that.
Well, actually, it's funny because I had never wanted to do a cookbook because I knew how much work they were, and I've seen other people go through the process. And so I had never reached out to anyone. It wasn't an endeavor that I ever wanted to take on. And I was approached by a couple of publishers before this one, and I declined. I just didn't like the offers, and it just didn't feel right, and it didn't align. And then when this publisher came along and they contacted me, I had a meeting with them. Everything just felt right and aligned. And I really liked how they were really supportive with the authors, and they let me have total creative freedom. And so then I decided, you know what, this is a good time. I love this publisher. I have the time to do it. And they wanted me to do raw desserts, which was my specialty. And so I was totally down for that.
Is there a reason to start with desserts as opposed to, I don't know, soup?
Yeah, for sure. Desserts, I think, are one of the best raw food transition cuisines that you can either give to somebody who's never eaten raw food or start in the kitchen yourself, because most people love sweets. And, like we were talking about earlier, no one's going to refuse, say, a raw chocolate truffle or a raw chocolate brownie, or raw vegan ice cream. I mean, even if you say it is raw vegan and you show it to someone who's really skeptical, who's non-vegan, it's going to look delicious. They're going to want to eat it. So I feel like it's a really good segue into vegan food and into raw foods. So that's why I love raw desserts, but also too, I love the creativity, the color of raw desserts. I feel like they're a lot funner to make than savory raw food. I have a lot of fun with savory raw food as well, but raw desserts just look so pretty and delicate, and there's so many different designs you can do. You can get really creative with them. I've always had a sweet tooth, so I really dove into raw desserts and took all the courses that I could take. And I had a little farmers market business where I was selling raw chocolate at one point in Edmonton, Alberta. And I think raw desserts are a great segue.
It's probably easier to get taste testers as well.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, totally. There's a battle for that. I would fight to be one of your testers.
Totally. Like my husband brings, when I was doing the cookbook, and you can imagine how many desserts I was testing and how many I had on hand all the time. And so my husband was constantly bringing them to work for his buddies. And they would be like, eating these red velvet brownies. And they're like, these are the best chocolate brownies we've ever had. And then my husband tells them, yeah, guess what? They're raw vegan and they're made with real beets. And they're totally shocked. These blue collar construction guys, like just devouring these raw vegan desserts.
That's amazing. Beautiful. I love it. That's awesome. So tell me a little bit more about the process of creating a cookbook such as the one you've just done. What's involved? Because I know it's a lot of work, but share a little bit for our listeners to get an idea of what it's like.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I have an amazing publisher, and so they are really, really organized, and they have teams that specialize in every area. So they really guide you and take you through the whole process. And the first thing that we had to do was obviously figure out what the cookbook was going to be. And then you have to come up with the table of contents, having the outline, which was really helpful. I always say now to people, whenever they're creating anything on any project, create the outline first and then build on there, because otherwise you're going to be so lost. And that was the best thing that we could do. So we solidified the table of contents, and then I got to work on testing the recipes. Once I had all of the recipes completed, then I did all of the photos, because I did my own photos for the book. And then you come up with the recipes and you're like, wait, I still have to write all the chapters. So then I wrote the book at that point, and then submitted the manuscript. And then I submitted the photos after. And then it goes through a whole big process then with the publisher, right? It goes through many rounds of editing, design, a lot of back and forth, all of the gram measurements, conversions. It's a big process. And then when that's all done, then you get into all of the marketing, and they have a really amazing marketing team that, really took the reins on that, and we're in that process right now. So it's a long process. It's funny, I signed the contract in January of 2021, and it's just being released now in December.
Almost 2 full years later.
Yeah, almost 2 full years later.
What's your day like when you're working on that? Like, do you do multiple recipes in a day and take all the photos? How does it all work?
So it totally depends, especially on my creative mood, because as a creative, and when you're trying to create recipes and come up with something new, you have to be in a certain mindset. So it really, really depends on the day. I mean, there was days when I was going until 2 a.m, just making recipes all day and getting them photographed. I also reshot a ton of them because I didn't like how the first photos turned out. So I mean, it really all depends. I also run my online business, so every day is very different for me. Right now I'm done the cookbook, so I am focusing more on my online business, but so it really just varies.
A little bit of catch up, I'm sure, when you kind of push the book through, and then it's like, oh, all the things I haven't been doing.
Yeah, well, actually, I was creating a course at the same time as the cookbook, so it was a lot. So I was creating savory recipes for my savory course, and then creating raw desserts for the cookbook at the same time. And I remember I was like, why did I do this to myself? Because the manuscript was due right at the exact same time that I had launched my brand new course. So it was a lot. It was like this whole year, 2022. I mean, literally all I did was work, and like just worked myself to the ground. I'm taking 2 weeks off in January to go to Thailand on a detox retreat, which is much needed. So I can't wait for that. But yeah, I mean, I definitely worked very, very hard this year on all of these projects, but it's fun, right? I love doing it.
I was just going to ask you, where does somebody who eats mostly raw food go on a vacation? Because I'm guessing a place like Eastern Europe is not on the map necessarily, but there's going to be better options.
Yeah, I mean, Yeah, I love going to tropical places, obviously, because there's so much fresh fruit and fresh produce. But I've never been to Thailand. Bali is one of my favorite places to go. Obviously, it's a raw food mecca. There's like a juice bar on every corner in Ubud, Bali. I've been there twice and absolutely loved it. I love going to Mexico, and I've never been to Thailand, and it's always been my dream to go to one of these detox resorts. So I just can't wait. I'm super excited.
That sounds awesome, and I look forward to your review. It sounds like a fun thing to do. Let's talk a little bit for people who are listening and who are not familiar necessarily with the raw food movement and who may be wondering, like, why would you do that? I like my food to be cooked, So tell me a little bit about what are the benefits of a raw food approach and what you personally like the most about it.
Yeah, so raw food is very important for our bodies because it's a way for us to get those living micronutrients, the living foods, the hydration that our cells need, that our body needs in order for everything to flow through for our organs to work properly, detox. Yeah, so especially too, raw foods are really high vibration, and it's important to get that high vibrational energy when you're eating the raw foods, and you do notice a big difference. And for me, myself, I notice if I'm eating a lot of cooked food, just everything, my energy, my vibration, just everything will come down. I'll start to feel like really lethargic. And yeah, raw food is just really important and beneficial just for overall health, just to get the vitamins and minerals and nutrients that our body needs.
What is the definition of raw or living? Like, what's the point at which something leaves the realm of raw and becomes cooked, for example?
Yeah, good question. So studies have been done that any food that's been heated above 115 to 118 degrees Fahrenheit starts to lose its, all of the vitamins and nutrients start to get degraded and starts to lose its nutrition. So this is kind of the threshold, the raw threshold, which is great because you can still heat up the food a bit, like through dehydration, even through sous vide, and still you're able to eat warm, comforting foods without eating cooked. And that's the biggest misconception with a lot of people. They think that raw food is just cold salads and juices and smoothies. And I was like, wow, I can never live like that. I need warming foods. I live in Canada. Yeah. And so you can definitely still eat a lot of warm, comforting meals done in a raw way.
Okay, that sounds great. That's kind of an easy way to remember. And how does one get started? Like, if somebody decides to try to we all eat some raw foods. I suppose we eat, it's
exactly.
So it's like you tell a non-vegan, here's a vegan apple. Oh my God, so yeah. Apples are a good example. That's an easy one to adopt. But how can we go a little bit deeper into that? Where do we start?
Yeah, really good question. So the easiest place to start, obviously, is incorporating a smoothie into your daily diet. And smoothies are great because you can pack them with a lot of nutrition. So you can put in a bunch of fruit, veggies, superfoods, the superfood powders, and get all of these things packed into one big nutritious smoothie. So I always tell people that, like, if you are wanting to start with higher vibrational, higher living foods and get a lot of nutrition, then start with a daily smoothie every morning.
Okay. And what's next? What comes after?
And then start incorporating raw meals. So you can start incorporating, if people are going from a cooked to a raw diet, I always say maybe do a raw cooked fusion, which is how I eat now. So my one main meal will have like steamed sweet potatoes or steamed yams with just a bunch of raw veggies and a big raw salad done with a homemade raw dressing, because raw dressings are so easy to make, homemade dressings, right? Or you can have some grains to start off with. So just start incorporating more raw ingredients into your dishes, and then maybe have some raw chocolate for dessert.
Okay.
Or a little raw dessert, little raw cake, because that's really easy. And just start from there. And then obviously people go to different levels. So for me, I started incorporating juicing about a couple months after I started eating more higher raw foods. And so juicing is a really good way, again, to get a lot of nutrients in one glass, which is why I love juicing. And it's super hydration and a lot of good stuff.
What about, do you eat any beans or legumes? Are those considered to be cooked? I guess so, if they're not fresh.
Yeah, they are cooked, but you can also I sprout mung beans. So you can sprout mung beans, you can sprout lentils, you can sprout chickpeas. I never have too much success with chickpeas. I don't use chickpeas a lot, but lentils and mung beans sprout really easily. So I sprout those all the time. I even make like barbecue sprouted lentils and then dehydrator, so they're crispy and crunchy and they're seasoned, and you can add them on top of your salad. So yeah, they're really good. More protein and fiber to add to your meals as well.
Right. And it's very satisfying to bring in the different textures as opposed to just having one same experience in your mouth the whole meal.
Exactly. I'm all about texture in food for sure.
That's awesome. What about equipment? You've mentioned, the first thing you did, you went and you bought yourself a Vitamix. You've talked about dehydrator. Are those kinds of appliances? I mean, a Vitamix is necessary to life.
Yeah,
right. That's a given.
Just in general.
Yes, exactly. There was about a year and a half ago, I was in my office working and my husband was doing the dishes. And I hear the sound and I hear swearing and I know that the Vitamix jar is broken. It's just, I know for sure that's what happened. Like he had the handle in one hand and the jar was broken. Yeah. I don't even understand how that could possibly happen. But before I stood up from my desk and went to the kitchen to check if it was okay, I just ordered a new one. Then I went to the kitchen and I said, "Are you okay?" And it was like, "I broke it." And you're going to be so upset. I was like, "I already ordered another one. We just cannot live without it."
Oh my gosh, that is so funny.
Yeah.
Did you not try to get the warranty?
It's absolutely necessary. It's absolutely necessary. Oh, it was 10 years old. So the Vitamix obviously is essential to life, I think, as a vegan in general. And you've mentioned it was your first purchase. Why is it important for vegan food? And for raw food.
There's so many things you can do with it. So obviously you can make your smoothies, but you can make dressings and sauces, which are really important. For me, I like to have really smooth and creamy thing like sauces and smoothies and dressings. And I find you can only get that result with the Vitamix. You can also make soups in the Vitamix, bases for different things. You can make wraps, so many things. So it's very, very versatile. So I feel like if you're going to get into raw food, you need a really good high-speed blender, and you don't have to get a Vitamix. A lot of people are really partial to like Blendtec, and there's also a lot of other really good high-speed power blenders out there, like the Omni Blend that's available now. So this is just a really good versatile tool.
Anything else you need in terms of appliances if you want to eat more raw food?
Yeah, so just starting out, really, that's all you need. But I always do recommend also a food processor, because if you want to make things like, if you want to get into raw desserts and make cake crusts or even like raw breads or energy bites or power bars or any of that kind of thing, it's really hard to make that in your Vitamix. You need a food processor, because otherwise the Vitamix will just make something like a nut butter, because it processes ingredients really quickly, where in a food processor, it doesn't, and you can still get that chunky texture. And food processors, I always recommend, like if you're just starting out and you don't want to get an expensive food processor, I had a $40 Hamilton Beach food processor from Amazon for 4 years before I upgraded to a Cuisinart. So you don't need a really expensive one. You can get a really cheap food processor and start from there.
I had one of those. Mine was from Canadian Tire, but I'm pretty sure it was a $40 Hamilton Beach. And I replaced it with a Cuisinart, and I think I missed the Hamilton Beach. It was much easier to clean. Yeah, that's the first criteria for me for a food processor. But I gotta say, sometimes I feel like saying goodbye to my food processor because it takes a lot of room. But now I'm listening to you, and I'm like, okay, I need to give it more raw food and give it a chance to live to its full potential. What else? You mentioned the dehydrator. Is that a must-have, or really good to have? And what do you do with it if you do have one?
For me, I can't live without my dehydrator, but it all depends. I mean, obviously, it's a lot to purchase at once if you don't have these pieces of equipment, and a dehydrator is a pretty big investment, just up there, with a Vitamix. So if you really want to get into raw foods and start, exploring textures like wraps and breads and warming foods, things that are crunchy to add texture to your salads, then I would say yes, just get the dehydrator. And I always recommend, people always ask me, should I just start off with a 4 or 5 tray? And I'm like, no, it will fill up so fast. You definitely want to just splurge and start with the 9 tray, because otherwise you'll be so unhappy with your 4 or 5 tray. So
go big or go home with the dehydrator.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, I have a free dehydrator training. Actually, people can find on my website, and it's a whole class with a bunch of recipes and all the technical aspects on how to use an Excalibur dehydrator and brands that I recommend and all of that stuff. So if people really want to learn about dehydrating, then they can get that free class.
Fantastic. Warmly recommended. Not too warm, not above 115 degrees, but it's a great class to take, that's for sure. And a big question that I certainly have, and I would have had that question a few years ago, but now in the context of rising food costs, the question is even more pressing than it was before. Mm-hmm. How is it possible to eat raw on a somewhat limited or reasonable food budget? Because the cost of nuts and seeds and even fresh fruit can be if not prohibitive, at least a little intimidating.
Yeah. So there's so many different options. So number one, I always recommend, if you're going to be buying a lot of dry ingredients like nuts and seeds, don't ever buy them retail from the store. Buy them in bulk from online suppliers, because you'll be saving yourselves about triple the cost. For example, like almond, everything has increased so much in price. Like I remember when I could get a pound of almonds in bulk for like $11, and I think it's like $15 now in bulk. But if you go to the store, it's like over $30 retail for a pound of raw almonds. So buy in bulk. You do have to pay shipping, but even with the increased fuel surcharges and everything like that, these suppliers have now more contacts with different couriers, so you can still keep the cost down in shipping. So don't be afraid of that aspect. But the more you buy, the cheaper it is. So I always stock up. I'll buy big, like 5-pound bags of all my nuts and seeds. And I have a little mini bar fridge on my balcony where I store them all. And so it keeps them fresh for a year or even longer. So don't be afraid to stock up and get a lot at once, just to save yourself those costs. And then you always have them. And then with fresh produce, farmers markets are always going to be less expensive than the retail store. I like to buy organic and or spray-free, but what's really great about the farmers markets is that they have a lot of spray-free farms that sell their produce, because we all know the organic certification is like the whole loophole to get. So like if you can just find anything that's spray-free, that's amazing as well. But yeah, going to your farmers markets, buying local, and for fresh produce. For my fruit, I always buy frozen fruit because it's way cheaper than buying fresh fruit. And here in Canada, as you know, it's really hard to get good quality fresh fruit other than like bananas and citrus and apples, right? So I buy big bags of frozen fruit. So there's so many different ways that you can save. And we find, even my husband says this all the time, that when people say that eating healthy is expensive, and it's not. When you look at like meat and cheese and all of these products, those are like insanely expensive now. And I find that you can still eat healthy and raw vegan on a budget for sure.
That sounds fantastic. In terms of, you did mention having a mini fridge, because I suppose you don't want to stock up too much on things like nuts that can go rancid if you're not going to be able to refrigerate them. Is that right?
Yeah. So really high fat nuts and seeds like walnuts, pumpkin seeds go rancid really easily, flax seeds. You definitely want to store them in a cooler environment like the fridge. This is why I have a mini bar fridge on my balcony. And you can get these mini bar fridges for like a little over $100 now. And it's great. So it keeps them fresh for a really long time. But if you're going to keep them at room temperature, yes, then you have to be careful and you can't store them too long. And this is why I don't like the bulk bins in the grocery stores, because you're like, how long have those walnuts or pumpkin seeds been sitting in that bin for? I don't know how fresh they are. So buying in bulk is just much better for that anyways. But even if you don't have a lot of fridge room, what I do as well is when I get my huge bulk order in, I will soak and dehydrate a big batch of nuts and seeds. And then I keep them in the freezer. So they're soaked, dehydrated, and they're in the freezer. They're going to last even longer. But what's great about that is I don't have to soak them to remove the phytic acid and neutralize the enzyme inhibitors. So I have my soaked nuts and seeds all ready to go. If I want to make almond milk, I have them already prepared. I can just throw them in the blender, soaked and dehydrated, and blend them with some water, make some almond milk. So that saves a lot of time as well.
That sounds great. So from there, if people listening to us want to dip their toes a little bit further, perhaps down to their knees or even more, I know you offer a lot of really good courses. Tell me a little bit more about where you would recommend someone start and where they could go after that.
Yeah, sure. So I do offer a wide variety of courses for if people want to learn more about raw food. I always say to start with raw desserts because it's really fun. You can get really creative in the kitchen. And I have some mini courses as well that people can take online if they just want to dip their toes and just do one recipe. They can just try out, one recipe and do that. And then I have a little mini cake course that's all nut-free raw cakes. And then I have a full raw dessert course, which people can take if they really want to dive into raw desserts. And then I also have a course that I collaborated with another chef in the States. His name is Don Maloney, and we created Raw Food Culinary Academy, which is everything about raw food, all the savory side, everything from sprouting, using how to use all of the equipment. And that's for really anybody for any level can take the courses. I mean, you don't have to be wanting to do it professionally. It's for home cooks as well, people who have never done raw food before, because it really takes you from the beginning stages to intermediate to advanced.
That is very appealing. And, I think I'm going to sign up. I hope he's not listening, my husband, for your raw dessert course as a Christmas present.
Nice.
I think it's a nice creative activity, and for anybody who's a little bit of a health nut and interested in sweet things, I think it just makes a really nice Christmas present and way better. I mean, you can also give somebody like me another dehydrator. That's a good Christmas present too.
Yeah, totally.
But I find the course hands-on. It makes a really nice present that has longer lasting positive impact and joy, and something we can even do together. So
yeah,
I like that.
Exactly. Do together, and exactly. It'd be a fun family thing to do. And those are always the best gifts.
Yes, totally. And I very much look forward to your book when this episode is broadcast. It may have just come out. We don't have a picture yet, but I'll put one up with the show notes. It is called The Art of Raw Desserts, and it will be published in mid-December 2022 and available worldwide. I'm so thrilled that it's going to come out for your raw and sweet genius.
Thank you so
spread
much.
all over the planet.
Thank
you, Crystal, for being here today. It was wonderful spending more time with you, and I will make sure to share the link to your website and to your dehydrator course, among other things, so people can get acquainted with you and bring more living foods into their life. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you for inviting me to be on here.